This is our last class of this module, and we'll be talking about Gene the person. And we don't have a video of Gene for the last class of movies about Gene because he really didn't talk about himself. So we don't have a clip unless somebody else knows of one where he's really talking about himself and his life. So we're going to have a little clip of Joan talking about Gene, and I just put up a clip of my talking about Gene in the helpers group. And I think you have the whole, that whole video assigned to you, but I put up a shorter clip of that. So it seems important to me that we talk about Gene as the person, the context of his life, and what it means to really look at the context of his experience. And you've read, I hope, the interview by him where he talks about this escape from the Nazis at the age of 10 or 11, where his father is navigating these incredibly difficult, complex sets of decisions of how they can get the hell out of there. And his father would say he was making the decisions on the basis of his feelings. And Gene, as a little boy, wondered, what kind of feeling is this that can tell you what to do in these circumstances? And I think you all remember that. And we want to talk about how that question, what kind of feeling is this that can guide you, that can tell you what to do, is the question that he spent his life investigating. And when I've talked about that in the past, I always reference that statement he made as a young philosopher, that he didn't want to study philosophies of others. He wanted to study the place where those philosophers went to get their ideas. He wanted to study that knowing that comes from the larger realm at the edge of thinking. And we want to look at today this context in which Gene lived and worked and contributed to us. And we also want to talk about how Gene lives in you, what your inner Gene is like, what you've gotten from these videos, what it means for you to study his work and to be guided by the felt sense that he articulated so beautifully, and that without that felt sense of his father's, he wouldn't have been here to give us all of his spirit and his wisdom. So contextualism, let's start with that. Gene used to say that you don't love somebody because of this and this and this that you love about them. And from his point of view, it was silly to sort of put an ad in the paper or something like that and say, I want a partner who is this and this and this and this. because that, for him, didn't add up to love. You get all of those qualities and you might say, no, I'm not interested in them. And what you love about someone can't be quantified or calculated like that. It's this big thing and this very primal thing and mysterious thing that is much, much larger than what we can say about it. And maybe we can think about Gene's life and contribution and what he gives us in that way, that it isn't particular things that we learned from him. It isn't the circumstances of his life or not knowing them. It's something so much more complex. But looking at the surround, looking at the context, looking at the circumstances, the history, looking at his time, his zeitgeist, where he was born, how, and this incredibly dramatic beginning to his life gives us another way of holding the whole larger experience of him. I'm always a little reluctant, and I talked about that in the video that I assigned you from the helpers group, to talk about Gene's history and his escape from the Nazis in relation to his work, because he was reluctant to talk about it for fear that he would be reduced to this story. And he was so against reductionism, but maybe particularly we're against reductionism when it comes to us. None of us want to be reduced to this, this is Lynn. This is, I had trouble understanding that at first when he didn't want to do a recorded interview with me about his escape from the Nazis. And then I realized that I might feel the same way, that I was born with a unchanging eye condition in which, as a young child, I had to go to a Braille class before they invented the glasses that I can wear for reading. And if I told the story of being a child and being legally blind, and then people referred to my work and said, "Oh, that was Lynn Preston. Yes, she was the legally blind therapist." I wouldn't like that at all. All of us want to be known for our larger selves and what we want to contribute. And yet I know that that my eye condition as a child and going to a Braille class and things like that had a lot to do with who I am and what I contribute. So there's something about contextualism that can expand our sense of the person and what they're saying and meaning and living. And that is very different than reductionism, that is a kind of cause and effect of, oh, the person had this and therefore they said that. And Gene always hated that kind of assessment of thinkers and philosophers. Oh, they said this because of this, and would never participate in that kind of discussion. But let's sort of try on this contextualism for ourselves. And I want to invite you to think about it, experience it with me in a focusing way, and see what comes to you. Now, I'm going to suggest different things to you that you won't have time to go into. It would take would take a lifetime to go into all of these things. But I just want you to get the feel of the going into it rather than going into it, if you know what I mean. And you would have to know focusing to know what I mean, or have a sensibility that's like focusing to know what I mean. So let's take some breaths together. Settle into our seats. And let go of all the stuff. And let's turn to the big question of who am I? I mean, we couldn't get a bigger question than that. Who am I? Who am I in this moment? And if you have a pen or phone or something, you might want to write down a word or something that comes to you. Who am I in relation to my time? You know, what zeitgeist were you born into? Just feel yourself as a person of your time. I forget who said that a meaningful life is to engage with the concerns and passions of your time. What about your family and the place that you were born? I am my zeitgeist. I am my family. I am my situatedness. And what kind of body were you born with? What was your life history? Your journey? And just the felt sense of the whole of your journey. Just a phrase. Who are your people? Who you identify with as being yours in some kind of way? Your friends, your community, your interests. Your social, political belonging or non-belonging. Just the sense of your whole context, the generations, the generational journey that you come out of. Some peoples think of a life not as a separate entity, but a life as a point on a continuum of generational evolution. Just see how it feels to think of yourself in that big surround, that you are a system within systems within systems within systems that go way, way out. And you are an interaction with all of those infinite systems. And you are changing in that interaction at every moment. You are in interaction with the world situation right now, with the environment, with all those aspects of it. When you're ready to come back, you might make a little note for yourself and then come back to the room. What was that like to have this whirlwind tour of your of your personal contexts? I think that when we talk about contextualism, it isn't about it being true or false, because it's the contexts are infinite, but it's about getting this wider feeling of the more that we are. What I didn't say in the attunement was it what it's also would add is our circumstances now that make us who we are. And we do talk about that more often than we talk about all of these other things. It's when we think about our context, it helps us to get our mind around being an interaction rather than a thing. We're not this thing in the universe that has a beginning and an end, and there it is. But we are this interactive process with so much so much beyond our awareness. So many infinite systems that we're interacting with. It's not that we are, it's that we're always becoming. And then to look at how we're becoming and what we're becoming from and what we're becoming in and what we're becoming to brings a kind of awe in a way for me of like, oh my God, how did I get to have this self? Wow. What a self. Making meaning in a very powerful way. What comes to me about that, I was struck by something you said, Liz, about, well, what if Jane's father wasn't right, or what if, if that story didn't have anything to do with who he became. That idea that we make meaning, that things aren't true or false, we make meaning of the thing. But I love the way Jane talks about how there is no objectivity, like there is something he did or he didn't. The story was true or not true, but that we are never outside of things looking at it. We're always in it. So how we think about it and how we make meaning of it has something to do with what it is, even an experiment, the experimenters and what they think has something to do with how the experiment is done. And so there's no subjectivity and there's no objectivity, because everything that's in us, the meaning we make, shapes the impact that we make on the world. And so there is this interaction of me and the world. The way that I look at it is I'm going to impact it that way and make a difference in that, which will make a difference in me. Anyway, I just wanted to stick in that little part that I like about there not being any subjectivity or any objectivity, but only this interactive process. Let's switch gears just a little bit for and talk about how do you experience the Gene story, his context, in relation to how you experience him? What does it do? Does it how does Gene's story live in you, or how does it impact how Gene is for you? It's a wonderful, amazing story of this. Gene was in Vienna, and the turnabout that happened, where they had to escape, and there were all of these secret ways that different people knew. And there was one woman that studied that and didn't escape herself, but just helped other people to escape. And there were many different routes. And there were circumstances that were quite incredible, like the circumstance of hearing that they wanted to get into Germany. They wanted to get into Holland, and the way would be through Germany, and hearing that the guard on Sunday mornings of the train, that the train would stop at the crossing, and that guard went to church on Sunday, and the substitute guard didn't know very much or care very much about things. So his father said, well, we'll get that train. And that the guard didn't know how to examine the papers properly, and they got through. And I don't know if it was that train. I think it was that train where when they stopped, Gene's father got out of the train to get Gene a lemonade because he was very thirsty. And while his father was getting him the lemonade, the Gestapo entered the train and said, "Where is Dr. Gendlin?" And they said, I don't know. And the train was about to take off, and the Gestapo left. And then Gene's father came in from the back, didn't even know about these Gestapo, right? Katerina, you remember that part. And they set off again, and their lives were saved by his father's impulse to go get the lemonade. Not that Gene was saying that was, he wasn't saying that Gene's father had a felt sense of that had to do with saving them at that point, but just the way that the things happened, and Gene's father would always go back to his sort of feeling of knowing something, feeling of knowing that he should go get lemonade, for his son. Like, you give your life meaning, but the meaning doesn't only arise in you. It's also that the meaning gives rise to you. It's this interaction with your making meaning and meanings making you. You see what I mean, BJ? There are many, many, many external meanings that we're born into, that are in us. But there isn't, in Jean's way of thinking, there isn't really anything that's external, because what's external is in us and we are in it. I know that's a that's a very difficult concept, but in a way that is what we mean by contextualism, that we're made by so many things and then we make so much, but it's this process of being made and making this creation that comes. There are two things that I want us to sort of flag up. One thing is that the way that I'm talking about it, it sounds like the context makes us great. The context does make us great, all the complexity. And the meanings are meanings that nourish us. And there's also the intergenerational trauma. There's also being born into our time and our place, and the very ugly ideas that we're born into that are then a part of us that we have to reckon with. So it's not only beautiful, but there is something that gives us a way of, when we see, oh, I don't know that I believe this. This is what we say in our country at this time. We say this, and I never really thought about that, but that's in me. I feel that. I remember my mother waiting for me in a store. And she was an old woman at the time, not like me now, but she. I came out of the store and asked, well, what were you doing while I was shopping? And she said, oh, I was completely entertained. I was watching people and counting how many obese people there were in the street. And I said, why were you doing that? And she said, well, that's interesting. I mean, this town has too many obese people. And she went on about it. And I thought, where did she get that? That what is that? That would be her way of entertaining herself. And she was just brought up to feel and the time and the place, and that you had to be a certain weight, you had to dress a certain way. But all of us have our contexts in us, and not only the beautiful ones, but the ugly ones. And it really helps us to feel like these contexts that are ugly are also making us. Jean was very insecure in certain ways. That context of escape, I'm sure, had to do with a lot in his life that he struggled with, that wasn't so grand. So Jean's experience of seeing this knowing in his father and being interested in what kind of experience is this that can guide you, was a passion for him his entire life, and a fuel. And there was in him a sense of determination and endless endless energy to understand more and more and to communicate more and more about what this way of thinking from the implicit could make for us. A feeling that he had of being in a continual creative process and being engaged and being so grateful about that gift of having this this strand to follow and to offer and to see how it could grow. And Jean was very willing to flesh out something, that my experience of Jean, in some way, my living with Jean my whole adult life, even after he's dead, I'm living with him. And many of us, many are living with him, that needs to be fleshed out as a real person. And he wanted people to see him person. That quote that everybody quotes about Gene saying of Carl Rogers, that he couldn't imagine Rogers really understanding him, this shaky, insecure substance that he was. That feeling of himself as this shaky, insecure, shy person, and his willingness to have people see him that way if they wanted to. And I love that if they want to look in my eyes and see that, that's okay with me. If they don't have to see that. If the clients don't have to know that, but if they want to know that, like you do, then he would be very willing for you to know him that way. In terms of the question, how did he deal with his mentees and his community and his clients idealizing him, and what did that do? I think that I might have mentioned, but the experience that I had of him was that he was both very passionate and confident about what he knew. And he was also incredibly humble and took whatever he knew with a grain of salt. But it was a grain of salt where he would be saying, I know that this isn't the be all and end all, and you people will, go further than I have. And I know there's a deep knowing that this is important and this can change the world. And those lived together in him very easily. When I was first I was his client, and then later his colleague and at times collaborator, we would have arguments about things that were mostly it was about my arguing for the felt sense of the us, and his being worried that the individual would be dropped out. of it. And so we would be arguing and yelling at each other in moments, and then taking a breath, and then he would take my part and he would argue for my side and say, I believe this and this and this, but you might say this and this and this, which I hadn't thought of saying. But his way of doing that was very much part of who he was, and what keeps focusing from being a cult. He was very much in favor of people disagreeing and not going along and being outsiders, Liz, going into the kitchen and finding somebody else that wanted to do what you were doing, and starting your own thing, and never letting anybody tell you that you were teaching focusing wrong because you were teaching it your way. He was very much an iconoclast and very much an extreme anti-authoritarian kind of person, and yet with this sense of honoring the deep knowing of himself and of other people. I'm trying to get a hold of the quality that that my inner Gene has from Gene, and other people may have very different qualities that they've gotten from Gene, but it does have to do with the sacredness of each mind, each body, each person, and that everyone has something to teach you. And I've said to Arlene that I would be I would be Hitler's therapist, or I would be Trump's therapist. Not that I'm saying they're equivalent, but that there's something about the faith that if you really deeply listen to someone, just to their insides, past the places that that stop you, if you can go past those stop signs, that there's always something that can that the person can teach you. And that curiosity that comes from that, taking everybody very deeply seriously, because you're taking not just that small self, but that small self as a microcosm of bigger things that you're learning about in them. So I realized in talking to a friend recently that I've been teaching about Gene with great tenacity, and making all these videos and all these classes, and much more than before COVID. And my friend was saying, well, why, or and I realized that the circumstances of my life after COVID, and then my partner became quite sick, that there's something that I need in him. I need my inner Gene. And so I was thinking about telling you this in this class, and I was thinking, what is it that I need that I'm getting from him? It's like I'm living with him in a deeper way. And the him that I'm living with, I knew a lot of things that were for you, Liz, pain in the ass, craziness, mishigas. I mean, the whole thing. I was certainly not idealizing every aspect of Gene. But the quality that I got from him has to do with taking myself very seriously as a thinker. And believing that each of us has something that we're given, that we are given and we make together, that is our gift to the world, that the world is giving us something and we're giving, that we are responsible to articulate, that our lives articulate it, not just what we say, but how we live and who we are and all of that. And we were looking for that poem about the rain of Leviathan, and she says at the end of the poem, there are hands placed on my shoulders. What has been said to me? How has my life responded? And it's that feeling of there's something that's being said to me, and how is my life responding, that I feel is very much in the sphere of what I've gotten from Jean. This confidence in evolution. And BJ, when you were talking about it's a beautiful story, but there are many ugly things in the world. And I was thinking about, yes, and the confidence in evolution, in development, in growth, in that being the nature of life, no matter how awful the circumstances or how ugly what's being made is, it enables me to face the difficulties with a kind of robustness that Jean had, even though he was so insecure. I had a dream many years ago, and in the dream, I met my high school boyfriend, and what came out of the dream was this statement that he made to me. He said, "You have something to say." And he looked at me intently. And then he said, "You have something important to say, and you haven't really said it yet." And I go back to that many times. I think, I haven't said it yet. What is it that I haven't said yet? And I realized today in thinking about our class that it might not even be that I haven't said this and this content yet. You know, maybe my life hasn't unfolded completely yet, and I haven't said my life yet. But it does feel like there was this incredible support and encouragement from Jean to say what I have to say, and to take it seriously and unfold it, and devote myself to what it can do, to the creation of it, of myself, of the interaction of it and myself. The question is, what is it that your life has to say? And what haven't you said of it? What is the more of it? Asking you, Jim, particularly, and Liz, what is the more of what you have to say, which is what I think that my dream was. Right, it's always becoming, but there can be something that draws you in each moment. It's like feeling ourselves as being given a task of becoming, and that what we're becoming is a little part of a puzzle of the whole thing. And the puzzle is always changing, of course. But we have a piece of it that we're responsible to live, to be, including protest. You know, it's not only, it's a piece maybe of what should be and what shouldn't be, and this shouldn't be. But just see if anything comes to you. I think that boldness is something of that I really need of Jean's. The boldness to say the thing that might seem unacceptable, crazy, too abstract, whatever. But the boldness to say it and to let it let it develop as I'm saying it. So one of the things that I've gotten so much from Gene about is that his way with paradox. There's this and there's this. Remember, we did a session about it, and they are contradictory. You can't have this and then you find that triangle where there's another way. So what does that do? You want people to have their own way, and you want to preserve something that feels very important and special about Jean's contribution. And so if you focus on that, how can you do both? Or this third thing? There was a sense in that of not stopping when they're all the stop signs, because you can always go beyond the stop signs, and that this way of thinking with the implicit enables you to get by a lot of stop signs. A colleague of mine was saying the other day that in her groups, whenever someone brings up race, it shuts down the whole group. And that seems like a terrible stop sign. Like, what can you do? You can't do anything there. What can you say? And she was talking about her despair about that. And I felt that inner Jean in me saying, oh, here we have a puzzle. We could name this. What do we do about this? The group could focus on this. The name of it would be when race comes up, everybody shuts down, or something would be a name. And just that idea that we don't have to stop when we see big stop signs all around us. It might be with many different theorists, I don't know, but it's holographic. It's like you could say it's the improvisational dimension of Jean's work is the essence, and everything follows from that. But you could say that about many, many different things, that you come into that. If you get that, really get that, you get all of these other things.